Hello, Mr. Rogues here, reporting yet again from the old asylum. Today we're gonna talk about supervillain origins, namely my top 5 favorite supervillain origins. Do feel free to also write down your top 5 favorite supervillain origins down in the comments. Number 5. The Lizard. That's right, Spider-Man's The Lizard. Well-meaning scientists creating some kind of formula in an attempt to aid humanity, but instead transforming themselves into hideous monsters. Comic books are chock full of these types of characters, and I love these types of characters, as I've talked about many times in the past. For some reason, this stock character never really gets old to me. Out of all of them, I would have to say that Spider-Man's The Lizard, aka Dr. Curt Connors, is my very favorite. So what is the specific story of this particular well-meaning scientist turning himself into a monster? Well, Dr. Curt Connors is a geneticist who lost his arm in the war, where he served as a medic. He's now trying to create a formula that will regrow lost limbs. Yeah, pretty far out there, but it's comic books. Obviously, he's planning on using this formula on himself to regrow his arm, but he's also going to use it for humanity. He's creating this formula by using reptilian DNA, as reptiles can regrow lost limbs. Again, it's comic books. Naturally, he decides to test the formula on himself. And lo and behold, he does regrow his lost arm. But the formula comes with some pretty serious side effects, as it also turns him into a lizard. Naturally, in this lizard form, Dr. Curt Connors is an evil monster who wants to replace all of humanity with giant lizards like himself. What adds further tragedy to the lizard's tale is the fact that he has a wife and child, who naturally desperately wants their Curt back. It's sad, it's tragic. All he wanted to do was to regrow his arm and to help humanity, and he ends up with this. Life sure can be unfair at times. The Lizard is definitely one of those villains whose origin story is his best story. Because after that story has been told and the Lizard has been given the antidote and been transformed back to his Curt Connors form, what do you really do with him? He has no real longevity. He peaks with his origin story, but it is a really damn good origin story. Number 4. Magneto. The X-Men's arch-nemesis Magneto, the master of magnetism, aka Max Eisenhardt. Magneto is, of course, as we all know, a mutant with the power to control magnetism. He's also a Holocaust survivor. Max is a German Jew who experienced the concentration camps of World War II. He's seen the worst of humanity and knows what it's like to be targeted for termination. Years later, when mutants become more public and start being persecuted by regular humans, Max is seeing it all happen again. But he can't let it happen again. He won't allow mutants to go through the same thing as Jewish people did. And the only way to keep mutants safe from humanity, in his opinion, is to wipe out humanity. Let mutants inherit the Earth. They're superior anyway, Homo superior as he calls them. Yes, it's a horrible twist of fate. Magneto has become everything he hates. Magneto has become no better than the Nazis. You can understand why though, and in a sense you almost can't blame him, but that doesn't make it any less horrifically ironic. Truly a great origin and motivation for a villain, and it also allows him a ton of longevity. Unlike the Lizard, it makes perfect sense for Magneto to come back again and again and try to wipe out humanity and keep mutants safe. Number 3. Mr. Freeze. Good old Victor Freeze. Now here's a character I've talked about a billion times on this channel, so I'm gonna try to make it fairly brief. His beloved wife Nora is diagnosed with a terminal illness. Freeze is a scientist and desperately tries to find a cure for her. But time is running out. So, with no other options, Freeze has her cryogenically frozen. With Nora safely on ice, Freeze has all the time in the world to try and find a cure for her. Well, he would've if he actually owned the equipment he was using. He doesn't. It belongs to his employer, the corporation he's working for. And when they find out that he's been using their equipment and their funds to treat his wife and not to make them profit, well, they pull the plug. And you all know the rest, of course. There's an ensuing struggle. Freeze is pushed into a bunch of chemicals, which transforms him into a walking popsicle that can't survive in above 0 degrees and has to live in a mobile refrigerator. A horrible tragedy and an amazing origin story for a villain. But it does also suffer from similar issues as the Lizard's origin, in that it doesn't really allow the character for a whole lot of longevity. His stories get repetitive after a while, but I've talked about that numerous times on this channel, so let's not get into all of that yet again. Suffice it to say, Mr. Freeze's revamped origin story from the 90s, the animated series, is really good. And honestly, the main reason so many people like him. Number 2, Sinestro. Sinestro is of course the arch-nemesis of Green Lantern, aka Hal Jordan. Sinestro used to be a Green Lantern himself once upon a time. That's right, he was a hero and a peacekeeper, protecting the universe from evil. How ironic, because now he's one of the greatest villains of the entire DC universe. Naturally, that's not how he sees it though. In his eyes, he's the only one with balls enough to do what's necessary to keep order in the universe. Sinestro is obsessed with order, and this is the reason he was kicked out from the Green Lantern Corps in the first place. The methods he used to keep order in his sector were just too extreme. Sinestro went too far. But of course that's not how he sees it in his mind. It's the Green Lantern Corps that are too weak. I love these types of villains. Villains who initially started out as heroes, but then fell to the dark side. What further makes Sinestro's origin so compelling and fascinating is the fact that while a Green Lantern, he was also the mentor of his now nemesis, Hal Jordan. That's right, he trained his now greatest enemy. They were once master and student, friends even. It's like some grand, tragic space opera, and honestly, you could make an entire movie trilogy based around the rise and fall of Sinestro. If that isn't a good villain origin, then I don't know what is. And now for my favorite supervillain origin of all time. Number 1, TwoFace. Yeah, of course it's gonna be TwoFace, who else would it be? His origin story is of course a big reason why TwoFace is such a great character. We all know it, of course. It's actually pretty similar to Sinestro's origin. He was once a hero and a friend of his now biggest enemy. TwoFace, aka Harvey Dent, was once the district attorney of Gotham City and fought more than most to keep the city safe and free of crime and corruption. But of course that was all ruined when Harvey became too mentally unstable and had half of his face disfigured with acid by a gangster. Perhaps the greatest hope the city had for a bright future, then instead became one of the city's worst nightmares. Tragic, ironic, just an all-around amazing origin story. And there you have it, my top 5 favorite supervillain origin stories. I also want to mention a runner-up, and that is Jigsaw, the Punisher's arch-nemesis. His origin story is very simple, yet so perfect. An extremely narcissistic gangster who's completely obsessed with his physical appearance, who's then horrifically disfigured by the Punisher. I mean, he has a perfect reason for hating the Punisher. Simple, but very effective. Don't forget to write down your favorite comic book supervillain origins down in the comments. And of course, as always, remember, Arkham Asylum awaits you in the next video.